Okay, hi. So I've been asked by some other Pimax users that are having maybe SLAM issues with the tracking to record a little video on some things that have been helping me. So I've got a whole bunch of Microsoft Flight Sim stuff going down here that are all kind of plugins for using Microsoft. Weather, realistic sounds, rendering things that help, kneeboards. There's little add-ons. Especially love the active sky weather and the say intentions AI air traffic control. Use those. Those are the most realistic things that help me practice for flying. And I've got a flight loaded here. We're on the ground here, just sitting on the runway at the end, running. Everything's running at Torrance Airport. Now, the details are really low for the out the window repeat view because that's not what I'm using. I'm using VR, and the VR views are very detailed. So just checking things out as they run. My CPU usage, Flight Simulator's using 31% just here before VR is going and we're really doing anything, and Pimax is using about 16%. The way to use the task manager to set things, I've turned process lasso off, is to click on the thing you want to adjust. So sort it by CPU percentage, and then go to right click on the thing that are using the CPU you want to adjust and say go to details. It'll take you to the detail page, still keep it highlighted, then right click on it again, and you can set the affinity and the priority. I think by default, it looks like, because I didn't have process lasso going, it looks like this was set to high, and it wasn't set to process zero as core zero as I was told. So the affinity didn't seem to be set by default, which is good. Not sure why I was told that by support, or if they've changed it, but it looks like I don't have to avoid core zero, and nobody should have to. And by default, you just want to make sure it's using all the processors under affinity, sorry, not infinity. Then the thing you're running, whatever game it is, I've got Flight Simulator here, do the same thing. Adjust its affinity and make sure it's set to use all the cores, and also set it to high. So priority is set to high on Flight Simulator, and it's set on that. My last thing I do is I set, make sure that OBS I'm recording, because it can kind of get bogged down by other things. I just set it to above normal. So it's below those other two, but the priority is above normal, and its affinity is set to use all the cores. When I look at the cores going, everything's kind of blended across all of them. If I do set the tracking on Pimax server here, if I set the affinity of that to say, let's just say cores 0 and 1, you can see the loads shifted on the first two cores down here. On the left side of the cores, if you look, you can see that those two are higher. On the left side of the cores there by CPUs, you can see some cores are using up to 99%. That's actually Pimax on those two cores is using pretty much 100% of those two cores. And across the board, Flight Simulator and everything going on is using about 43% of the cores, CPU. And it's not lagging terribly, but it is, tracking did seem to get thrown off there for a second. Yeah, tracking's off. Just reset it with both the Pimax and the Steam VR, and yeah, so if I go back to Infinity here and I just go to the Affinity and set that to using, let's see if I'm on the right thing. I want to make sure I'm on the right thing. 5 cores. There's no spreading across those first couple, and the last course on the right, most of those 5 seems to be used the most. That really doesn't seem to have a problem with tracking. It's smooth. But even better was just to leave Affinity on all cores. It seemed to be the best. And now you can see the loads dropped and nothing's at 100%, and it's just sharing the cores fine. So I'm not sure if support gave me bad info about Core 0 or Affinity or what, but just seeming to set Affinity to use all cores on all things and just changing the priority seems to be the best. And now if I go into Microsoft Flight Simulator and I set it to VR mode, okay, here we are in the cockpit, and I just reset the view a few times, and it stabilizes once it gets going here. We're getting about 35 frames per second and tracking smooth. And I'm rendering at 2900 pixels. So I can just reset the view here a couple times and you'll see it's solid. No issues. And I'm getting 35 frames per second. And the cores there, nothing's maxed out really most of the time. And I'm rendering 1.15 times res here. So you can see it's like really high. So let it cycle through. GPU is using 95% of the GPU. So 4960. But I'm using OpenVR Toolkit here to render really at 2900 pixels by 3400 pixels. So that's what's really being rendered, and it's being scaled up. And it's being scaled up by two things. It's being scaled up by itself, and then it's being scaled up in the options in Microsoft under the VR settings using the quality DSL super resolution. That's scaling it up. And then it's scaled up higher than the resolution of the headset and then kind of downsampled just a little bit. And that just, for free, gives you a little bit of temporal anti-aliasing detail. That's really a little bit better than the upscaling 90 setting that you can use in Pimax. Yeah, so when you upscale with 90, it renders at about 3200 pixels. So it's actually using a little bit more resources than this and not looking quite as good. So that's how I'm doing it. Working good for me. I could probably get away. Well, right now it's 36 frames per second. I might be able to get away with a little more. Let me go back though, and I'm going to turn off VR and go to 2D. Go back in here and got Microsoft kind of paused in the menus. Still recording here in OBS. So I'm going to go back to the task manager here. And I just want to show you real quick what Process Lasso looks like. So if I run Process Lasso, which I tend to use, it's automatically now set the cores on launch to what I set them to. So it kind of overrode what we were just doing. And yeah, a few things were left on cores. So I'm going to go ahead and set those. Set CPU affinity always to none. And that's how you set affinity in Process Lasso. You can just select all and right click on it and say CPU affinity always none. And now they're using everything's using all the cores. And here you can track the core usage as well in Process Lasso. In Process Lasso, you can also set by looking at what's being used again. So here, Pimax, you can see, and Flight Simulator are both using the highest amounts. And you can see the priority class is set to high. So you can right click on any app and go to priority, and you can see it's always set to high and what its affinity is. And then you also have an IO priority you can set, and induce performance mode, which is like a gaming mode, so you can give it priority, exclude from being balanced by it has a lot of options to control things. And then you can use, I like Process Lasso. That's what I tend to use to control it. But it's pretty similar to going into the Taskmaster and doing the same thing I showed you just a little bit earlier. I did also have good luck setting Pi Server to cores 0 through 4 and Flight Simulator cores 5 onward. And then I just set kind of OBS to the early cores too. And some of the background Flight Simulator tasks, I also went through and set to cores like 2 and 3. And that seemed to work great too. But just letting them do their own thing seems to be pretty much the best. And I think that's what I'm going to be trying from now on. So I'm not setting infinity, and I'm just setting priority with process lasso, and that seems to work pretty good. I do have lots of trackers, printed QR codes tracked on the front wall, and a couple on the side walls, and 2 on the side walls, 1 on each left, right, and left, and 2 on the ceiling, kind of in the middle of the ceiling. So there's lots of printed QR codes that are making this work too. It doesn't work as well without, if I just do this higher priority, it doesn't work without the QR codes in my room. And I would say for those that do have lighthouses, the lighthouse thing is definitely worth it. If you've already got lighthouses or you want to buy lighthouses, it is rock solid tracking and uses less core than any of this. So it's definitely the way to go. If you already have lighthouses, it's totally worth the price, and it's bullseye rock solid. The only reason I'm really messing around with this is to make sure that when the Super comes out, I don't think inside out tracking is probably going to be the only thing they're going to have for a while. The lighthouse tracking might not be ready, and I want to make sure that it's not going to just kill my PC. And obviously, I think by that point, my PC's barely running this. I'm not even sure if I need the Super. I've got all, I think on a 5090, I could barely get the max out of this with Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is the only thing I use it for. So, yeah, it remains to be seen whether I'm going to go with a Super or not. Okay, that's about all I got for this. Hope that helps. Just let me know if you guys get any similar results. Thanks.